Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the heart of a sprawling metropolis, the shimmering skyline reflected the apex of human achievement. Towering glass structures pierced the clouds, and above them, holographic banners of the Communist Party glowed with promises of security, stability, and unity. Every citizen lived under its watchful eye, their thoughts synchronized with the party's doctrine, thanks to the neural implants embedded in their brains from childhood. It was a world where the illusion of choice flourished, but free will had been systematically eradicated. Ethan Ward, once a proud history professor, now found himself in the underbelly of this gleaming utopia, hidden away in the depths of the old city ruin. This was where the forgotten gathered, those who dared to question, those whose minds had resisted the pull of the neural control for just long enough to break free. In the shadows, they whispered of freedom, a distant concept that felt more like a legend than a possibility, but Ethan believed he had to. The awakening army was small, ragtag, even former students, engineers, hackers, and everyday people who had somehow slipped through the cracks of the party, sans all seeing surveillance. Ethan, their de facto leader, knew time was running out. The party was tightening its grip on the populace, reinforcing the neural implants with stronger signals, erasing any last traces of independent thought. Soon, even the underground resistance would be silent. As Ethan leaned over the digital maps projected on the rickety table, he felt the weight of 1,000 failures pressing on his shoulders. Every operation they launched had been swiftly countered, their movements tracked with uncanny precision. The party's reach was too vast, its technology too sophisticated, and yet they had one last hope: Lena Morrow. Lena had come to them under the cover of darkness a month ago. Her face was pale, haunted by years of working for the regime she now sought to destroy. As one of the top neuroscientists in the city, she'd been instrumental in developing the very technology that controlled the masses. It was her hands that had shaped the neural implants, her genius that had perfected the algorithms that kept every mind in check. "I didn't know," she had whispered when she first arrived, her eyes searching Ethan, sigh for any sign of forgiveness. "Didn't you realize what they were doing?" "Not at first." Ethan had been skeptical at first. It could have been a trap, another of the party's intricate plots to root out the resistance. But something in her desperation, in the way she had risked everything to contact them, convinced him to give her a chance. Now she was their best shot at turning the tide. In the dimly lit bunker, Lena sat at a makeshift workstation, her fingers flying over the keys as she worked on the prototype device that could disrupt the party's Santa control signal. Her brow furrowed with concentration, her mind calculating probabilities, strategies, and worst-case scenarios. Ethan approached her, his footsteps light but deliberate. "How's that going?" he asked, keeping his voice low, though there was no need for it. The bunker was as soundproof as they could make it, though. Ethan never trusted anything fully. Paranoia had kept them alive this long. Lena didn't look up. "It's risky. The device could work, but there is a high chance it'll overload the neural implants. People could die if we activate it too quickly." Ethan frowned. "How many?" Lena paused, finally meeting his gaze. "Tens of thousands, maybe more." The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. Sacrifice had always been part of the plan. Everyone in the awakening army knew they might not live to see the day they freed the city from the party's grip. But this was different. "Is there any way to minimize the risk?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "Not unless we gain access to the central control hub. If we can get inside and adjust the frequency from there, we could release people slowly over time, give their minds a chance to recover." "Which means a full-scale assault," Ethan muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. "We're not equipped for that." "We might not have a choice," Lena replied quietly. "The party is reinforcing the implants every day. If we wait much longer, the chance of breaking through will disappear entirely." Ethan knew she was right. Minister Zuko, the mastermind behind the party, sound mind control regime, was relentless. Reports had come in of increased surveillance, public executions of suspected dissenters, and new waves of propaganda flooding the media channel. Zahal was tightening his grip, and the city was slipping further into darkness. "Let's gather the others," Ethan said after a long pause. "We need to discuss our next move." The dim bunker soon filled with the faces of the resistant. Tired, worn, but determined, they gathered around the table where Ethan stood. Beside him, Lena pulled up the schematics of the central control hub, projecting them onto the wall for everyone to see. "We're running out of time," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The party is closing in on us. If we don't TX, now we may never get another chance. Lena has developed a device that can disrupt the neural control signals, but we need to activate it from this central hub. Our only shot at freeing the city. There were murmurs of concern, but no one spoke up. They had all known the risks when they joined the Awakening Army. Ethan glanced at Lena, and she stepped forward. The central hub is heavily fortified, she explained, pointing to the map. The Red Guard will be stationed at every entry point. We'll need a diversion to draw them away, while a smaller team infiltrates the control room. Who's going in? Asked Marcus, one of the younger recruits who had once been a tech genius before the party had taken control of his life. I'll lead the infiltration team. Ethan said Lena will come with me to activate the device. We'll need 2 more volunteers. There was a brief silence before Marcus stepped forward, followed by an older woman named Sarah. She had lost her entire family to the party, social purges, and had nothing left to lose. Weary with you, Sarah said, her voice firm. Ethan nodded. Good. The rest of you will create the diversion. Make it loud, make it messy. We need the Red Guard distracted, long enough for us to get inside. The plan was set, but as the meeting broke up, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gnawed at him. The mission was suicide, and they all knew it. But if they succeeded, they could break the party's have, hold on the city, and give humanity a chance to fight back. That night, Ethan sat alone in his small makeshift quarters, staring at the map of the city. His thoughts wandered to the days before the party had taken over, when people still believed in choice, in democracy. He remembered teaching students about the importance of free will, about the revolutions that had shaped human history. Now those lessons felt like distant memories from a world that no longer existed. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Lena stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. Can she sleep? She asked, stepping inside. Ethan shook his head. Too much on my mind. Lena sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the map. You're rethinking about the people who might die if we activate the device, aren't you? Yeah, Ethan admitted, but it's not just that. I am thinking about what comes after if we succeed. This city it's been under control for so long, I am not sure people will even know how to live without the party telling them what to think. Lena was silent for a moment. Then she said, freedom is messy, Ethan. It's not perfect, and it's not easy, but it's worth fighting for. We have to believe that. He looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. She had been part of the system that enslaved their minds, but now she was fighting to free them. If she could believe in a better future, then so could he. We'll make it, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. The following morning, the resistance was in motion. Ethan led his team through the dark alleys and abandoned tunnels that crisscrossed the city, avoiding the surveillance drones that hovered overhead. The air was tense, thick with the anticipation of what was to come. As they neared the central control hub, Marcus hacked into the security grid temporarily, disabling the alarm. The team moved quickly, but the tension was palpable. One wrong move, and the Red Guard would be on them in seconds. At the entrance, they paused, waiting for the signal from the diversion team. The plan was simple, because as much chaos as possible on the opposite side of the city to draw the Red Guard's attention. The seconds ticked by, and then in the distance, the first explosion echoed through the street. A soft move, Ethan ordered, leading the team inside. The next few minutes were a blur of movement, the team navigating through the labyrinthine corridors of the control hub. They encountered minimal resistance at first, the Red Guard clearly occupied with the diversion. But as they neared the control room, things took a dangerous turn. An alarm suddenly blared to life, and red lights flashed, illuminating the darkened corridor. Ethan cursed under his breath. The system must have detected their presence despite Marcus's best effort. Within seconds, the sound of heavy boots pounding on the metal floors echoed from every direction. The Red Guard was coming. Move, Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening siren. They sprinted down the corridor, weapons drawn, knowing they were outnumbered and outgunned. But there was no turning back now. The door to the control room was just ahead, a thick steel barrier separating them from their goal. Marcus ran to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys in a desperate attempt to override the lock. Come on, he muttered, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he worked. Ethan and Sarah took up positions on either side of the corridor, ready to face the incoming onslaught. In the distance, the sound of gunfire echoed, signaling that their diversion team was still holding the Red Guard's attention. But the guards were too fast. "They're coming," Sarah called out, her grip tightening on her rifle. "Just a few more seconds," Marcus said, his voice strained as he worked against the clock. Ethan saw heart raced, adrenaline flooding his veins. The pounding of footsteps grew louder, closer. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was at stake pressing down on him. Every second counted. If they failed here, it would all be over. Finally, with a hiss of pressurized air, the control room door slid open. Marcus let out a sigh of relief, but there was no time to celebrate. "Tire, go, go, go." They rushed inside, and Lena immediately moved to the central console. The room was vast, filled with rows of computers and holographic displays, all connected to the neural network that controlled the minds of millions. This was the heart of the system, the place where humanity see free will had been buried beneath layers of code and propaganda. "Lock the door," Ethan shouted, and Marcus slammed his hand on the panel, sealing the room shut behind them. Lena was already at the console, her hands a blur as she connected the prototype device to the central system. Her face was set in a grim mask of concentration as she worked to override the controls and initiate the disruption. Ethan stood by her side, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. But it wasn't long before they heard the pounding at the door. The Red Guard had arrived. "They were trying to break through," Marcus said, his voice tensed low. "That door won't hold for long." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. They needed more time. "Jelena, how long until the device is ready?" "Minutes, maybe less," she replied, her voice calm, despite the chaos unfolding around them. "I just need to adjust the frequency, or else we risk killing everyone with an implant." Ethan turned to Marcus and Sarah. "Hold the door as long as you can. We need every second." Marcus and Sarah took their positions, weapons ready, as the pounding on the door grew louder. The Red Guard was relentless, their efforts to break through intensifying with each passing moment. The metal creaked and groaned under the pressure, and Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before they broke through. "Almost there," Lena said, her voice tight with focus as she made the final adjustment. The hum of the central system grew louder, the lights flickering as the device integrated itself with the neural network. Suddenly, the door burst open with a deafening crash, and the Red Guard stormed in, their rifles raised. Marcus and Sarah opened fire, the sound of gunfire echoing through the room. Ethan dove behind a console, returning fire as the guards pushed forward. The air was thick, with the smell of gunpowder and the sound of bullets breaking off metal surfaces. But they were outnumbered. For every guard they took down, two more appeared, advancing with ruthless precision. Marcus grunted as a bullet grazed his arm, but he didn't. He stopped firing. Sarah's face was a mask of grim determination as she held her ground, but it was clear they couldn't hold them off much longer. "Lena," Ethan shouted over the gunfire, "we're running out of time." "Almost there," she replied, her fingers flying over the keys. "Carry just a few more seconds." Ethan ducked as a bullet whizzed past his head, his heart pounding in his chest. He fired another shot, but the guards kept coming. They were too close now, almost upon them. Desperation clawed at him, but he couldn't afford to lose hope. Not now, not when they were so close. And then just as it seemed all hope was lost, Lena Sal's voice rang out. "Right, it's on. Done, done." With a final keystroke, the device activated and a low hum filled the room. The lights flickered once more, and then, as if on cue, the guards stopped in their tracks. They froze, their expressions blank, their weapons falling to their sides as the neural implants in their brains shut down. Ethan stared in disbelief as the guards stood motionless, their minds no longer under the party's control. He couldn't believe it. It had worked, they had done it. But there was no time to celebrate. Lena slumped against the console, exhausted, but her eyes were bright with victory. "Sarah, we need to get out of here before they reboot the system." Ethan nodded, adrenaline still coursing through him. "Tiara, Marcus, Sarah, let's move." They sprinted out of the control room, leaving the stunned guards behind. As they made their way through the corridors, the sounds of chaos echoed around them. The city was waking up. People were regaining control of their minds, and the realization of what had been done to them was spreading like wildfire. But so was the party-sized response. Alarms blared across the city, and the Red Guard was mobilizing to restore order. Ethan knew they had little time before the full force of the regime came crashing down on them. Outside, the city was in turmoil. People flooded the streets, their expressions a mixture of confusion and anger as they tried to make sense of what had happened. Some clutched their heads in pain, the sudden return of free thought overwhelming them, while others shouted in defiance, their voices rising above the chaos. Ethan led his team through the chaos, keeping to the shadows as they made their way toward the rendezvous point. They had planned for this moment, had prepared an escape route that would take them to the outskirts of the city, where the party's control was weakest. But even with the plan in place, the danger was far from over. As they neared the edge of the city, they heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire and the roar of approaching vehicles. The party's forces were closing in, determined to crush the rebellion before it could spread any further. Ethan's heart sank. They weren't going to make it. Suddenly, a voice crackled over his earpiece. "Sorry, Ethan, we've got you covered." It was the diversion team. Against all odds, they had held out long enough to regroup and were now moving to cover their escape. Ethan felt a surge of relief. They might just make it, after all. With renewed determination, Ethan and his team sprinted toward the rendezvous point, where the rest of the awakening army was waiting. As they ran, the sounds of the city in revolt filled the air: explosions, gunfire, and the cries of the people waking up from a long, dark sleep. By the time they reached the outskirts, dawn was beginning to break, casting a pale light over the city. The awakening army had gathered, their faces weary but filled with hope. They had done the impossible. They had broken the party's control. But as Ethan looked back at the city, he knew the fight was far from over. The party was wounded, but it wasn't defeated. They would regroup, and the battle for freedom would continue. But for the first time in years, Ethan believed they had a chance. Lena stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Tira, this is just the beginning." "Tira," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but it's a restart." Together, they turned and walked into the dawn, ready to face whatever came next.